Hello and welcome to program number 8 in Visual Literacy 010. Today I'm looking at illustration, and as you can see I'm outside the home of the star of the show. This star will be Gosha. Gosha and Longan Sanaki live here in Perth, and Gosha is a very, very promising and outstanding artist. Gosha comes from Poland, but not only is she a fine artist, she's a printmaker, she's an illustrator, and she's done a whole range of art. Now, in just the 12 months gone, Gosha has won 7 awards that I know of. She's illustrated local books as well as books for overseas. So come with me. I'm going to knock on the door and hope Gosha is at home. Good morning, Gosha.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Hello, Longan. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Come on.
Well,
please.
come with us. Well, here we are inside the home of Gosha and Longan, and we're going to be looking at illustrations in various books. We're going to be looking at the history of illustration and how it fits into the art. Now, it could be said that when we look at illustration, it has its origins way back in the time of Paleolithic art. The way that they illustrated what they were going to hunt on the walls of their caves. Now, the illustration I have here is a hand-done one using crayon, and it is very highly colored. But that is the interpretation of the illustrator. Illustration could start with the work of the Egyptians, and I call to mind the Book of the Dead. Now, the Book of the Dead, of course, was something that was done on papyrus, and it was buried with dead people so that they had with them a travelogue that took them into the next life. It gave them things like passwords, magic potents. And in this particular book here, you can see an actual illustration taken from one of them where the soul is weighed against a feather. And if the soul was lighter than the feather, then it would pass on into afterlife. This is very typical of Egyptian illustration. Now, these early forms of illustration were done on scrolls of papyrus. But the Egyptians were the first people to actually introduce the codex form. Now, the codex form is what we call a book today, a many-leafed format. And so from the Egyptians we have gained so much. But Gosha, earlier we were talking about the illustrations of the Mesopotamians, weren't we?
Yeah, the Sumerian epic story, which was my inspiration for a series of etchings for my master's degree exhibition in Academy of Fine Arts in Poland. So I was, as you can see, very much inspired by history of human civilization, and that was the subject of this book actually in very, very early age. That was a book about a man who was civilized from the very barbarian stage of the human being.
Yes. And
So,
you have some of those here.
I have few examples of these etchings. There was 12 of them, and of course, when you make any illustration for any text, you have to find the way how to show the subject. So the rules, the code of doing things. So that was my idea, to show opposite forces like bad and good, or civilized and uncivilized, with two colors, which is brown and black. Brown was this early stage, uncivilized hunter stage of human development, and then black, which was more civilized, like Sumerian cities and people living in community already, more organized community.
Right.
So these two colors that Cott was going through all 12 illustrations and depict the story.
The story as well.
Yes.
Of course, the early form of Mesopotamian writing was what we call cuneiform, isn't it? And they actually pressed those little sort of triangular shapes into the clay and developed it. Now here, of course, you can see that the brown is gradually sort of being swallowed up.
Yes.
By the feeling of
by black, which is
black.
Power.
The power.
Yeah.
The overriding power.
Yes.
We could say the same sort of thing in politics today, that you know, certain people have been overpowered by what they may see as blackness. Yes. And so it has that analogy that applies to the 20th century. And of course down here you've got a lot of light coming into it as well, and that's feeding up into the black. Oh good, that's quite an interesting one. I like that work. It shows a lot of detail. I like the background in this one here. Now, I happen to know that you're also a draftswoman, and of course that would...
That's pure
skill.
etching,
yes.
So it shows also drafting ability, of course.
Yes.
So, as you can see, although I was a student of fine arts, I was very much interested in book design from my early beginning of my career, actually. Yes. And even though I only had few courses during my study time about book design and illustration, later when I finished, I made my degree, I just became a professional illustrator and book designer, because I was studying book design by myself.
Yes.
So that was always second stream of my career, book design, and illustration.
That then would fit in with this this is a lovely old book. This is called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, and here is, you know, the typical Islamic writing, which is quite beautiful. I'd love to be able to do that. And of course the Middle Eastern form of illustration that supports the text. And I think that's what illustration is all about, isn't it, really?
Yes.
That the illustrator needs to be able to get inside the writer's mind to be able to create an image that illumines the text. But sometimes, as we know, that the text explains the illustration.
Yes, that's
and sometimes the illustration explains the text. So there really, it's a beautiful marriage.
Exactly.
Between the two of them. Yes.
I think unbreakable.
Yes. Of course, there are some people who would argue that the illustrator is like a third person, and you have the writer, you have the reader, and then you have the illustrator. But to my way of thinking, the illustrator is really illuminating and making more clear the aspects of the written text, putting another point of view that you may not have considered is also important. And we spoke earlier also about fairy stories and things, like where when you read stories to children, the children remember the beautiful images. Now, do you have any of those sort of books here?
Yes, because it was one of my major children books, I mean illustration for children books. And I think that's, when you make children book illustration, it's like you become a child again. So you start to, the first, of course, you read the story, you become a child, and then you imagine all the story, and So you are a creator of images and future remembrance for these young children. I remember myself when I was reading tales, Johann.
Hans Christian Andersen.
Christian Andersen, sorry.
Yes.
And that was beautiful illustrator in Poland, Schanzer. So these books, they were usually illustrated by him. And of course, I remember the people and these scenes, everything what was in these books illustrated by him. So when I read the text again, I visualize his illustrations. So that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to give this imaginative world to future children, for them to remember and to picture all these stories for themselves.
Yes. And you have one of those there?
That's one. Hans Christian Andersen, illustrated by me.
Oh, right.
It's a story about snail and the rose bush. So the rose bush changes its appearance during seasons, and that's a snail which lives under the rose bush with his house.
Oh yes, because you can see the windows are shuttered.
Yeah.
And the door. This would really appeal to little children.
Yeah, and the snail is quite grumpy creature.
Yes.
That's why it's black and white.
Right.
Just the rose is colorful because it has quite nice and warm character, and the snail is grumpy, so that's why it's black and white.
He seems to be wearing quite a strong vest, I would say, the black and white stripes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now the blue here refers to what? Summer?
No, the blue is winter because you don't see any leaves on the branches. And then is spring, which is very green and yellow, and buds.
Oh yes, I can see them, yes.
On branches, and then is summer.
Right.
And then is autumn, which is very red and rusty in Poland.
Oh, right, and I can see that the roses have gone to the pip stage.
Yes.
Or they're starting to, yes, all disappear.
So that's actually the story about time and all these endless changes in time. So existence of the world, I think.
Right.
Somehow.
And of course, this is something that children would delight because they can talk about the snail, they can extend onto the story, they can relate to the colours and all the rest of it, which is very, very important. Yes. Yeah, is there another one there, just quickly?
Oh, maybe another book.
Oh, all right, yes.
That's because this one is written, of course, by in 19th century, but that one is contemporary, written by Yugoslavian writer and translated to Polish. So I was the designer of whole book, like in this case also. But in this one, I was also the designer of the fonts. And at that stage, in publishing, we didn't use computers yet. So if you design any special lettering for a book, like headings or beginning of any chapter, you had to just make the letters by hand.
By hand, yes.
So that's what I did here, and also here. So they are letters made by hand. And
the initial one, yes.
You can also see here illustration, beginning of the chapter illustration, and that's the printed one, and here you've got original.
So that's the original down here.
Yes.
And there's the printed one. So this is what you would send to the printer.
To the printer, yeah.
Yes.
So then they print pages and they prepare mock-up for me to check.
A mock-up, okay, yes. I'm with you.
Yeah.
And there's another one?
Another one is here. So that's the last one.
This last one here.
Yeah.
Now that, of course, you've got your title.
Yeah.
But you would do this plus that.
And also all design of the book, which is how the text is positioned, how the illustration are positioned, and I had to find out how many pages this book will have. So I had to count the text, how much space
Oh,
it
now that's
takes,
something I didn't know.
Because you have to know where the illustration comes and how big it should be. So everything must be designed. And so I did this design and positioned the illustrations. And then when the proof was ready, I checked it and stick the proofs of illustration into the text.
I see. So then you also do the coloured ones?
Yes, full-page illustrations, which are very important for children's books. And as you can see, that was not so brilliant stage of Polish printing industry. So you can see the difference in color.
Yes.
And quality of illustration, design and paint and then printed.
Yes, because down here,
you
the
got
little stockings are quite yellow.
Yes, and this moth here is much more reddish than in original, which is a little bit brownish.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, because you've toned it back to push it back.
Yeah, so we can see the...
There's almost a Chagall'ian, or, you know, the influence of Chagall coming in here with these floating figures, or almost like Peter Pan.
You know, when you do illustration and you are an artist as well, so you always, I think, introduce your favorite paintings into your work.
Who was your favorite at that time?
Oh yeah, I think Chagall was very much, and then Miro.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Did you have another one there of your favorite?
Yes. This one.
Oh, that one, that's beautiful. That really is, that's lovely.
So the original.
Ah, so you've got the original, yes.
I was lucky enough that they gave me back my original, because they don't do it usually.
No.
They just, sometimes they just destroy it during printing process, because it's a lot of dirt there in printing house. I mean, it was. Now here I think it's different, but in these old days when they use this traditional process, sometimes they destroy illustrations.
Yes, yes. So here, of course, the text here complements, or the illustration complements the text. So,
yes, exactly. So, of course, I got the manuscript of these stories. I read it, and then I thought about this book, I think, 3 weeks before I decided about design and the style in which I wanted to do the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's very important to find appropriate style to the text.
Yes,
like
yes. You have to have.
Here I've got illustrations for poems.
Right,
Again,
yes.
They are poems about one of Polish states, and I made them in style of a woodcut. So it's painted, but it looks a little bit like woodcut, and of course with handmade letterings. Because in this case, when it's very specific, even now you have to make letters freehand.
Right.
Yeah.
But also from another point of view, that people who may be watching this program, for example, they may not be able to read what that says there because it's written in Polish, but they have an idea what it's about because of the illustration that's on the front of the book. So that is where illustration comes in so importantly, because it can give the observer an indication of what the story or the book is about. Yes, that is an important point.
Another one is here. That's a poem about city, so the main feature in this city.
Yes, and it captures that woodblock technique all the way through. Yeah. Okay, good. We've mentioned there about you thought about it for 3 weeks.
Yes.
But that would take me back to sort of what the Chinese would do, because they contemplate for a long time before they actually do anything. And it was actually in China that paper was first produced. And although they didn't use the codex form, they did develop printmaking, a type of print. And the print was made from clay and pressed into wax. And then from there, they got their own form of printing done. but their illustration was part of that. Then I suppose the next sort of development after the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, and the Chinese would be what we call medieval period. In medieval art, they used a lot of these sort of decorative features as ends to chapters, opening a chapter, this kind of decoration for whole pages. There's a whole range of things in here, isn't there, that
yes.
they used for example, borders on pages. They use those kind of things. Now, in the medieval period is when we come into the illuminated manuscripts. And I suppose one of the most famous ones is the Book of Kells. You'll find the original Book of Kells in Trinity College in Dublin. And it was it's a beautiful book that's put together on vellum, which is, well, it's young goat skin. And these young people, they were monks, priests, were isolated, one could say, in Ireland, and they did all these by hand. And what you've got here in this particular one is the decorative border, the typical illuminated bird or Celtic design, and then the old writing over here, and then the text. So looking at that page, for example, the illustrator has to think very carefully about how the page is put together. Would you agree with that?
Yes, of course. And we have to mention, I think, that in medieval time, the illustration was very, very important, extremely, because at that time, not so big percentage of public was literate. So
yes.
People had only one chance to know the text, which was looking at illustrations.
That's right.
Yes.
I mean, it's the same with the reason why they developed stained glass windows, isn't it? Because
yes,
people could read the story by looking at the colours and the shapes.
Yes, yes.
And the people.
Beautiful altars.
Yes.
That was the Bible for poor.
And rich in colour. And this beautiful book, and you will see it actually on any trip to Ireland. If you go to Dublin, go to Trinity College and have a look at that. Now, there's a whole range of images that they use. And when you look into the images, they have little faces and little animals crawling around. And it's full of curlicues and arabesques. And it actually suggests to the reader their nervousness of living in such an isolated community and in such a foreign land, because many of them, of course, came from the Middle East or out of the Coptic regions, and they would never go back.
And I think it also shows the ability to observe the nature and copy the nature and copy the plants and surrounding area.
Oh, yes. And it does all of that. Now, in here somewhere is what we call the chic row. Just let me find that, because it's the famous one, of course. Let me see. Ah, here it is. This isn't the best colour, of course, because a lot of books, when they're copied from the original, don't pick up on the exact colour. But in this one, you've got, you know, the cat and the mice, and you've got little faces, and you've got this beautiful shape that looks as if it's been cut out of tin, and it looks like a metallic edge to it. But that's the famous chic row that is found in the Book of Kells. This is the same. It's the Irish manuscripts again, and you can see the difference in colour, of course, and this is a disparity that you get in books. But these were the illustrated manuscripts. They're much bigger than this, of course, than what you're seeing here. Many of the actual books are twice the size of this particular book sitting on the table.
Yeah, so you can imagine how much of time it takes for one person to write and illustrate this kind of book. But we can learn a lot of from these books. We can learn how the world looked like at that time, and how, in which condition, how these people lived. So that's not only imaginative work. I think that was almost like photographic work for that period of time.
Yes, yes.
Documenting the today.
Yes, definitely. No wonder they chained them to the desks. I mean the books, not the artists.
Who knows?
Maybe they did both. Now, of course, then that leads to the German development of printmaking, where they actually used lead, wasn't it? And they developed their form of printmaking with the German printing press. But at that point, I think illustration started to go downhill for a while, because it was done just in one colour, and the illuminated manuscripts started to disappear, and a lot of the rich colour started to disappear, and so they only used the black, and they became rather crude, and that lasted for about 400 years.
But I think, on the other hand, it was extraordinary, because the cost of book went down, really, because
Yes.
of Gutenberg press and this printing process of the book. So the book could reach quite a wide audience at that time, which was really big step forward for development of book and and collection of books, which people can make even if they didn't have such a background like a noble family or a king himself. They could, like,
Yes.
in cities, where the growing cities at that period of time, the families of merchants and tradesmen, they could afford to have libraries
Yes.
at their homes. So that was really
That's
amazing.
a very positive
Yeah.
side. It's really the birth of a form of technology,
Yeah.
making things more accessible to others. Yes. So that then brings us, say, to the 19th century, not the 20th yet. And we have books like this one, which was designed by Audrey Beardsley. And this one is called Le Mort d'Arthur, or The Death of Arthur, the King Arthur. And you get all his incredible illustrations. This is very typical of Art Nouveau, isn't it?
Yes, of course.
And you have these beautiful decorative panels around the edge, and you have a little bit of text, and he worked in black and white.
Yeah, and you can see how very much fascinated about medieval time he was.
Yes.
By the design and type of font
Yes.
used, and these borders, like we could see before. So the book was made in 19th century, but reminds you about medieval time.
Yes. And he does lots of these beautiful little illustrations all the way through it. And that's quite a lovely page. The way it's set out, the balance.
Yes.
And that balance, it goes right back to sort of Roman times, does it?
Yeah, and you have a lot of rules in which you construct the page, actually. That's the construction, geometrical construction of the page, and balance between space on bottom and top and of both sides. So depending of position of the written text and illustration on the page, you can determine if the book was designed in the older style or very modern, open or closed composition. That's quite a huge knowledge, actually.
Yes.
For book designer to design position of the elements and to have the balance in the book, and then to show the character of the text also by design of the page.
Now, the artist, the illustrator, has to have that knowledge, because no computer would have that knowledge, would it?
You have to tell your computer how to do it, of course.
You do.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people today make the mistake. They think the computer can do everything, whereas it's actually up to the artist to have that knowledge and manipulate and how they place things on the page.
I think that's because in computer programs you've got a few examples which you can use, and these examples, they are made not, of course, by the computer developers, but by the designers who made the examples, and then you have these patterns you can use by yourself.
So.
But it doesn't mean that it's something which doesn't have any knowledge in it. That's a kind of system you have to follow to get the good result in book design.
Good. Leaving Audrey Beardsley, we've got books such as this one, which is the combined works of Shakespeare. Now, the whole book is rather beautiful because it's bound in pigskin, and then it's very, very small to fit in all the words of Shakespeare's writings, and then the illustrations are coloured, and they are taken from stage settings, aren't they, in this one? So again, the illustrator is involved in the portrayal. This is, I suppose, a little bit of decorative illustration in that they're coloured. It's not really essential to the text, but it forms a lovely break.
Yes, and what is important in this book, that's constructed on the two different kinds of paper. This paper, which is very thin, lovely for print, and then you've got insets for illustration, shiny, so that it brings color.
And it heightens the color.
Yes, so this lithograph illustration, they look really beautiful on this paper. Of course, it would be disaster on that kind of paper. You can't do it. So that the book is really carefully designed, very beautiful, and expensive design, with even with this gold color on
the gold dust on the edges.
Yes, on the edges.
Yes. And again, the illustrator has to be aware of that, to know what kind of papers to use.
The book designer.
Yeah.
Because sometimes illustrator is a book designer too, but it's not always. Sometimes the book designer, I mean, person who designed the book, typography and all design, is a different person than the illustrator, because sometimes the publishing house invites an artist to be illustrator only for the book, but this person doesn't design the book. So the graphic designer designs the book and then puts illustrations made by somebody else.
Yes.
By the famous artist or the child or specific person. Yeah.
This is quite a beautiful one. This is actually a book designed by what we call the Limburg brothers. It's Très Richer, the Duc de Berry, and it shows each month, and it's written in French. But here you've got, you know, the typical courtly scene that would be occurring in that month, and up the top it has I think you call it the astrological table as well. And so it shows you the position of the stars and the various astrology signs as they move through the heavens.
So we can say that we've got the calendar in a form of book.
Yes, yes it is. It's a calendar in the form of a book, and it's quite exquisite. This is highly sought after, this particular little book, because the illustrations are quite exquisite, and it shows you, you know, the things that the court are doing, but also shows you what the peasants are doing in the background.
That's a source of information for a filmmaker.
Yes.
Yeah, about the history of this time.
Yes. Filmmakers and all those kind of people would have to look at these kind of things. Yes, this is the month of May, so it's coming into the summer and the activities of summer. There's quite a lovely one.
Yes.
Now, of course, you've done some illustrations for this book down here as well.
Yes.
And this is a book on West Australian art. I might point out that this is a book on West Australian women artists from the beginning of settlement here, white settlement, 1829 through to 1914. And it's written by my wife, Jan Altmann, and Julie Prott, and Gosha illustrated it for them. And what Gosha did was that she took the original works and then she interpreted them. Now we've got an example of that here, haven't we?
Yes. So that's the original illustration and illustration in the book. I designed the illustration in gray, so they don't dominate the original painting of the artist. They just try to complement and converse, I think.
Yes, I like that. Yeah, yes, converse. And so they work together.
Old work.
Yes, if I put that there, then our viewers can see the size of your original, and then how it is reduced down.
That's what we usually do. We do illustration originals bigger, so the printing company can make it smaller, and that enhance the quality.
Yes.
Of print.
Because the condensing something down.
It shouldn't be too big, but it's good when it's a little bit bigger than the printed one.
Right. Now to keep the costs down as well, you kept to the black, white and grey.
Yes, of course.
Of course. But the cover is beautiful in this particular case because it's rich with colour, and it shows you an image of Daisy Rossi on the front, and then all your work. Now this is lino block, isn't it?
Yes, that's lino cut. One of my lino cuts, and designer of the book decided, Jill Yelam decided to use it as a background for the cover.
Yes, and it works really well.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was very nice for me.
So that in book illustration, you make use of all the techniques of an artist: lino blocking, painting, drawing, etching, wood blocking, pen and ink, watercolor, combinations, mixed media, collage. You can arrange all of those things. And of course, in book illustration, your originals are usually larger than what ends up in the book. As I just said, when you condense it down, you get a much better colour reproduction coming through. So that's quite a gorgeous book from the point of view of illustration. Mind you, the writing's not too bad either, but then I'm biased. Now, what I'd like next to discuss, Gosha, is how you put your book together. Now, we've got here what you would call a draft or a mock-up of a book.
I think mock-up and all elements which are going to the book to allow to be produced. The book must be designed in a very complex way. Mm-hmm. So I designed this series of books, and that's one of them in the design stage.
Oh, so what you've got here would be the front cover.
Yes, and back cover.
And the back cover.
And spine in the middle. So
so when you open it
up, like this. Yeah.
I see. So that's how it works.
Yes.
Right.
So this book, the mock-up was in the computer. So all these elements were in the computer, and then because the book is like an album, so it's not much text, but a lot of illustrations. And in this case, you have to design every page separately and mark all elements on page, in which place they have to appear and how big are they and which colors are the main colors on the page. and
Right.
where is text.
Right, so that's what happens here.
Yeah, that's what's in mock-up. And let's say somehow some middle page. So here we've got the mock-up of 2 pages, one
Right.
next to the other. That's how you open the book. And that's pages 18 and 19.
Let's see.
In this book, it's different book.
Oh, different book,
it's
right,
just
okay.
the same series but different book.
Mm-hmm.
Here I mark the position of illustrations made from photograph. So this book is about Islam, and it's illustrated by photographs of my husband.
Oh, right. This is where Longan comes in.
Yes. Longan traveled around the world, and he took photographs of places where Islam is the main religion or very important, some interesting sites, people, and objects. And we designed a book about Islam based on his photographs. So here we've got 4 photographs on 2 pages. 2 of them, they are cropped around, so you've got like
right,
illustration.
so that's what that blue line is.
Yes, so that I had to make small image and mark for the printer how it must be cropped for a computer operator. Here comes full illustration, full photograph, so it's marked, position is marked, that's the size, and then cross lines represent illustration place in mock-up. And then here, these lines, they represent text. So you mark text in this way, how big space it occupies, and then the distance between text and elements of the book from the edges. You have to mark them. And then, again, colors of the elements, which is like here, we've got M 5% and here J 60%, which means that magenta is 5% and then yellow is 60. And then we can go to this kind of book, which is the color scheme for printers. So when you design the book, when I design the book, I always go for this book and then I look for my colors, for the color scheme for particular book, because that's the colors which can appear in printing. So doesn't matter what kind of colors you have on your screen, computer screen, because it's, of course it's different mode. These colors, they will appear in printing. So you've got percentage of components for the color, and you can choose which colors you prefer. Like
so
this one has, let's say, 100 of cyan, and then here is 100% of cyan and 30% of magenta, and it comes like this. So that's how you design the color scheme for the book.
I see, it's a combination of that and that.
So that's 2 colors together. We've got also 3 colors together. So you've got all possibilities which can appear in printing process for colors.
Right. And this applies to not just the color of the paper or the color of the printing, but it applies to all the aspects of the illustration, all the details within the illustration.
Yes, so these full elements, like these ones here, these ones, you design like this. You just choose, pick up the color, and then mark the position of the color. Like here. That's the color, the combination of elements, of percentage.
Yes.
So it comes around. And that's the dimension of
from the edge of the page.
From the edge.
Right.
So
that there.
So that indicates for a printer how to construct a page. Or for computer designer, computer manipulator, how to put all these elements together.
Right, and you have to spell out exactly what colors and what percentages all the way around.
And here you've got small because I told already about crossing lines,
Yes.
which represent illustration here. That's a circle, and with crossing lines. It means the small illustration in not definite shape. So that's like this illustration come in.
Oh, so these are the little shapes
Yes.
that you would pick to go, say,
Yeah,
at
like
the
here.
top here.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So
That
they
looks
are
like...
going to be scanned
Mm-hmm.
and then condensed and positioned on the page according to mock-up.
Right. I see. I really like this one here. This is beautiful. I wish I could do that. That's lovely.
I'm sure you can.
Oh,
Yes.
well, it's very nice of you to say so, but now you did that with ink or
Yes.
felt pen?
That's
It's
ink.
ink.
Yeah.
Mm. Yes. Yes, I've got a piece of work that I want to do that on too. So that's quite lovely. So these are quite large, but they actually, mind your paper there, they actually are reduced down to
become
these
like
little
this, so
symbols
it's
at the top.
1 centimeter
Yes.
big images. And I
Did you say
designed them,
1 centimeter?
yes,
Mm.
and I designed them because they are like leitmotif of the book. They show you the subject, the contents of the book. And they also they change according to chapters, because I designed this book that I didn't make this special breaks for chapters, so that was only an indication, because chapters were not so important to really break the book. So I just wanted to mark a change of subject a little bit, or
Yes.
theme.
And you introduced
Because
that.
again, as I said, the most important in this series were photographs,
Yes.
not text.
Not the text.
Yes.
These are beautiful little books because they're like what I call a little travel book. They can fit into your pocket or your
Yeah, that was my
backpack.
idea, actually.
Yes, and they're quite gorgeous. And they fit comfortably in the hand, they're light, and you can dip into them. They're like sort of like thoughts for the day. And that reminds me, you've got one here on what I call thoughts of the day.
Yes. That was second series of books I designed for the same publishing house. That was, the name of series was Moods.
Moods, all right, yes.
And this one was about harmony.
Aye.
Because me and my friend, we find very interesting text, which you know about. Of course, I think everybody knows this text. That's Desiderata, text found in Old Church in Baltimore, England in 1692.
1692,
Yes,
that's right, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So each line from, now where is that? Here it is.
Yes.
Desiderata. You've done an illustration using the beautiful
Mosaic. Yes, from Italy as a background. And then illustration, again, photographs made by my husband from around the world. And in this case, photographs, they complement the text, which is most important in the book.
Yes. So you've got a text for the opening line,
Yes.
for example, and then you've got an image. Is this the first image of the book?
Yes.
So I could say, go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence.
Yes.
And so this image here creates the sound of those words and
The mood.
meaning and
Yes.
the mood and the sense of harmony
Yes.
that you get into the image, because there's a beautiful sense of harmony here in the repetition of all the elements, the arches and the horizontal lines that disappear, and it sort of draws you in, doesn't it? So the photograph's very clever. And then you've got the text on the side there. So the next one would be the next line of this famous writing: as far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons.
So,
And so that's what's written.
sailing on
Sailing.
the river.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
That's really lovely, isn't it? the way it all works together. And so these, of course, some people may remember, there's an awful lot of reflection off that, this because it's been coated with plastic. But some people out there would actually remember this because it was very popular.
I think the text is popular around the world, actually.
Yes.
Whenever I talk about it, people know the text, which is really amazing.
Yes,
I think.
it's a lovely thing. Perhaps we should start working on one of those to suit the West Australian environment of...
Oh, I would be most happy about it.
Yes, it's gorgeous. Oh, that is lovely. Now, can you talk about this one, Gosha?
That's the illustration, I mean, image made on computer. I mean, this computer manipulated Longin's photographs. So I made this computer manipulation on base of Longin's photographs. So that's how modern technology allows illustrator or designer or artist do completely different things with components you can pick up from around. You can draw, you can use photographs, you can use things which are in computer program and can get completely different result than before you were able to achieve.
So there's the real subject over there, and this is the image that you've created. And
from Longin's photograph.
Yes, and the photograph, and you've scanned that into the computer and manipulated it. Yes. Beautiful. Okay. Now, I think at this point we may bring things to a close by reading this particular poem. This is taken from a lovely old book called The Wisps of Mist. You try saying that. So, we have a beautiful page here, and in this particular book the paper is handmade. You've got the decal edges, you've got these beautiful prints that are used in it, and this of course is about the ladybird, a very important little insect that lives in all parts of the world. And it simply says, even the tiny ladybug shares the responsibility, face the intricate balance of the universe, helping to keep it beautiful and productive. So, thank you very much indeed, Gosha, for today. It's been really lovely being here with you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this program. It was really enjoyable.
I hope
but
you...
quite stressful experience, I can say.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh.
Okay. So until next week, when we'll actually be talking to Longan about his photography, bye for now. And as the ladybird, be productive. Bye for now.
Bye.
This program was brought to you by the Western Australian Department of Training and Employment. For further information on this or any other TAFE course, call the Training Info Centre on 1800 999 167.